دکتر لیام فاکس وزیر دفاع انگلستان تا 2011 و وزیر تجارت خارجی تا 2019. خانم رجبی، اجازه بدهید بگویم که در کنار شما بودن چه شعفی دارد. شجاعت، اعتماد به نفس و آرامش شما الهام بخش است.
شجاعت زنان ایران برای به چالش کشیدن قدرت رژیم با آگاهی به اینکه هزینه آن چقدر خواهد بود، چراغی واقعی برای بقیه جهان است. شجاعت و اراده شما شعله‌ای واقعی است که در دنیای بیرون الهام بخش دیگران است.
وقتی امروز به موزه مقاومت رفتم، بعد از بازدیدم آنچه که در ذهنم برجسته بود، ظلم و بربریت کسانی که چنین چیزهای وحشتناکی را مرتکب شدند نبود، بلکه شجاعت کسانی بود که آنها را تحمل کرده بودند.
It is a privilege and an honor to be able to stand in solidarity with people who have to fight for a freedom that we in my country all too often take for granted. And can I say, Mrs. Rajavi, what an absolute pleasure it is to be sitting alongside you. Your courage, your confidence, and your composure are an inspiration, and the quiet dignity with which you make the case for freedom is an inspiration to people not only here, but around the world. And may I just say at the outset that the people around the world have no quarrel with the people of Iran, but with the regime of Iran. For Iran's enemies do not lie beyond Iran's borders. Iran's enemies lie inside the robes of Iran's leaders. I believe that the regime in Iran is one of the most toxic in the world. I believe it is rotten to the core by almost any measure that a civilized world would bring. I often talk about what I call the world's thugocracies, criminal regimes who simply have no regard for either the rule of law or the basic rules of humanity. Iran is worse than a thugocracy. It is run by the thugs of the IRGC, but it is overseen by the obscene theocracy of the mullahs. It makes it a more dangerous nation in terms of its regime than most. Economically, it has brought nothing but hardship to the people of Iran. Poverty in levels never known before, unemployment, inflation, and a standard of living that the people in Iran today do not deserve. But it is a deeper malaise. The entire concept of Velayat al-Faqih is not a noble religious quest, but it is a vile instrument for intellectual, religious, and political oppression. And only its complete abandonment can ever allow the people of Iran the free expression and self-determination that they require. Nothing else will do. It is a regime that is riddled with hypocrisy, from the regime's own involvement in the global drug trade, which it claims to detest, to the IRGC's black market activities in alcohol, We see it, the world sees it. And there is no respect for human dignity, no respect for human safety from the tens of thousands who have been murdered by the regime, imprisoned by the regime, tortured by the regime, and now a regime that is willing to use human hostage-taking of foreign nationals as a tool of its foreign policy. And I think it is to be hugely regretted that some countries, most notably Belgium recently, have effectively been willing to sign agreements that will be no more than a roadmap to future hostage-taking, whether for their own citizens or others. And I think that all of us in Western politics need to stand up to this abhorrent practice and make very clear that we cannot be blackmailed by a regime with no moral authority. And I think it is clear to all of us which side of the ledger the regime in Iran is on when it comes to the willingness to stand up for an international rules-based system. But I wanted today to come to make a very special, very heartfelt thank you, and that is to the women of Iran. From 2009, when the image of Neda Agha Soldan bleeding and dying on our TV screens taught us that at the heart of the battle for freedom in Iran are the women of Iran. We have watched in enormous admiration in recent months how that struggle continues today. The bravery of young women, older women in Iran to take on the might of the regime, knowing what the cost would be, is a real beacon to the rest of the world and tells us what the real battle is today in terms of women's rights in our globe. And thank you for the brave example that you are giving in that. You have no idea how inspiring that is to people around the rest of the world. And your courage and determination is something that in the world outside is a true flame that will inspire others. Now, as many of you know, I have long been an opponent of the JCPOA, the international agreement with Iran, because frankly, I don't believe it's worth the paper that it's written on. It doesn't deal with Iran's ambition to become a nuclear weapon state, merely to delay it. And delaying a problem like that is no real advantage. It does not deal with Iran's ballistic weapons issue. It does not deal with the regime's determination to destabilize its neighbors in the region, and it does nothing to stop its support for terrorism in other parts of the world, including mine. And I believe that perhaps you may say this, I would say this as a doctor, someone who practiced medicine, something may still be on the table, but sometimes you know it's never going to survive and get off the table. And I think we would be well advised to recognize that the JCPOA is dead. I felt that in 2009, with the stolen election, it was the moral low point of the West. When we saw the fight against oppression in the Cold War, and we saw the battle of solidarity in Poland, we were in the West willing to give our moral support. The United States even gave financial support to the Solidarity Union. In the Arab Spring, Western countries were seemingly willing to give support to the Arab uprising. But in 2009, when the people of Iran at the very least needed moral support from the West, they did not receive it. And I think that was a terrible black mark on the history of the free world. Because I don't believe that the people of Iran, those who seek freedom, want our sympathy. They want our support. They want to know that we will be with them in the battle for the values that we already have, for the freedoms that we already have in our own nations. And we should not rest until the people of Iran have the same freedom and liberty, democracy, and the ability to live under a rule of law that is secular and non-arbitrary. When I went to the museum today, I came away with a strong view not of the cruelty and barbarity of those who inflicted such terrible things, but of the bravery of those who endured them. It is that bravery that leaves me feeling so humbled in front of so many of you today who have made such sacrifices to get to this point. And I'll finish simply by saying what I wrote in the book, which was, the desire for freedom lies deep in the human soul. And although the battle for freedom may be difficult and the cost may be high, the prize, when it is won, is truly beyond value. Thank you for having us today.